7th Planning Commission meeting to order. I'd like to welcome our two new commissioners, Commissioner Scoggin and Commissioner Rubio. Welcome. All right. Do we need a motion for approving the agenda?
We'll do roll call.
Madam Clerk, would you do a roll call?
Commissioner Glenn,
Here.
Commissioner Allen,
Here.
Commissioner Chesbro,
Here.
Commissioner Rubio,
Here.
Commissioner Alder is absent, Commissioner Glashan,
Present.
Commissioner Scoggin.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll now entertain an attention. All right, first time. A motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve?
I'll second.
All right, the agenda has been moved and seconded. Any amendments to the agenda? Any objection to?
We do have one correction. On the bottom where it says correspondence, the email from Bo Gibb is actually being moved into one of the comments for the public hearings.
All right, so that was in our packet that we got here. Okay, so we don't need an amendment to change that. All right. Any objection to approving the agenda as written? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next item of business, the minutes from our January 17th, 2022 meeting. Oh, no, the consent agenda, pardon me. It's been a long week all day. All right, who would like to lead us in the pledge? Mr. Strawn? All right, now we'll move on to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda are the minutes of a regular meeting on January 17th, 2022. We have no introductions for quasi-judicial matters. We are introducing PC 22-02, a resolution of the Matanuska-Susitna Planning Commission recommending approval of an ordinance amending msb 17.30 conditional use permit for earth materials extraction activities to allow for an exemption of 20,000 cubic yards annually without a permit. The public hearing will be at our meeting on February 28th, 2022. Staff is Alex Strawn. Are there any changes or amendments to the consent agenda?
I'd like to pull the minutes.
Very well. Do we have a second to pull the meeting minutes from January 17th from the consent agenda?
I don't think you need to. Just then go ahead and see, get the rest of the consent agenda approved. And then, right?
All right. So Commissioner Chesbro is asked to pull the minutes from the regular meeting on January 17th. Is there any objection to approving the rest of the consent agenda? Hearing and seeing none, the remainder of the consent agenda is approved. Commissioner Chesbro?
Yes, there's one correction that I would like to make, and that is under elections, section B. It was actually Commissioner Glenn that moved to nominate me as vice chair. Commissioner Allen wasn't here. So that needs to be changed. That's one thing. And I have one other thing that I think that I'd like to mention, and that is in the minutes, this is my understanding of the minutes. When a motion is made, it's good to say that it was approved or seconded, but then it has to be approved. I mean, it's been seconded, but until we vote on it or approve it, it isn't done. And so we haven't been putting in the minutes that, like, for example, Commissioner Chesbro made a motion to nominate Stafford Glashen. The motion was seconded. It doesn't say the motion was approved, and that needs to be part of it. Sometimes we won't agree, and we'll have to put, these people said yes, and these people said no. Does that make sense? Okay, sorry for being a teacher.
All right, so we'll address those minutes next meeting.
I think we can move the minutes as amended.
If you like, if you don't want to see it written, I'm fine with that. All right, is there any objection to approving the minutes from the January 17th, 2022 regular meeting? Hearing and seeing none, the minutes are approved. I like the gavel. Susitna River Recreation River Advisory Board meeting? It doesn't tell me who's,
Chris Elder's supposed to do that, and since he's not here, we won't be having that.
very well, we will skip ahead. So this brings us through to audience participation. 3 minutes for each person to speak. This is for items that are not scheduled for public hearing tonight. Public hearing tonight is PC 22-01 regarding repealing the outdoor shooting facilities, and PC 22-03 regarding landfill material extraction. So there's no one signed up to speak at the public hearing. Is there anybody online who would like to speak to the Planning Commission public hearing about matters not discussed today?
Thank you, Chair. Looks like we have 2 people online that are available or ready to speak. Caleb, do you want to let one of those in?
My name is Jerry Hupp, Jerryhupp. I'm sorry, I may have misunderstood you. Is comment on PC 2201 and 2203 is coming up later in the meeting. Is that correct, or is that currently?
That is later in the meeting.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll raise my hand later. Sorry, I misunderstood.
The other caller, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I guess I had the same mistake. The aforementioned individual wanted to give some testimony regarding resolution of PC 2201, and I will stand by as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I need to gavel the public hearing closed. With that, the public hearing is closed. Oh, is there anybody in the audience who would speak?
Yes.
Oh, one more online.
All right, very well.
Hello?
Go ahead, sir. You have 3 minutes to speak, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, hello. I'd like to speak to say that the ordinance for the gun ranges was satisfactory, at least in a urban area.
Sir,
good.
you will
Can
have
you hear me?
You will have an opportunity to speak on that when that public meeting starts.
Okay, I'm sorry.
This is for comment not related to what is on the agenda tonight.
Okay.
Is there anyone in the audience here that would like to speak to, do we have another one online? All
I'm
right, if-
sorry, I made the same mistake as the fellow before me. I'm waiting to speak about the gun range. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. So if you're online and you want to speak about PC 22-01 regarding the outdoor shooting facilities or PC 22-03 regarding the landfill, those opportunities will come later. So if there's anyone online or in the audience that would like to speak to matters that are not on the agenda tonight, please step forward and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Okay, hearing and seeing none, now we'll move along. Public hearing is closed. All right, before us now is PC Resolution 22-01, a resolution of the Matanuska-Susitna Borough Planning Commission recommending approval of an ordinance repealing 17.68 outdoor shooting facilities. Staff, Mr. Alex Strawn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alex Strawn, Planning Director for the Matsu Borough. This ordinance is one of 3 ordinances that were brought back to the Planning Commission referred back to the Planning Commission for 90 days for review. This was an ordinance requested by Assemblymember Sumner and written through the attorneys. So most ordinances that come before you, at least from the planning department, are something that's created by the department. A lot of times we have working groups and there's a lot of research and things that are put into it. This is not the case. This was drafted by the borough attorney through a borough assembly. And so I don't have, I do not want to try to get into the mind of the assembly member that sponsored this, but we do have the informational memorandum that is put before you. I also certainly can answer questions that you have regarding the shooting range ordinance, how we administer it, or how we interpret the rules in there. This is an ordinance originally that in 2020 I had put pen to paper to write. It was a very controversial ordinance. This room was pretty packed, most of the hearings that we had, and it was a narrow vote to approve it at the assembly. But this ordinance was very simple. It just repeals it in its entirety. It does say in the informational memorandum that that perhaps there would be some follow-up ordinance that would make it, some version of it, applicable within the core area. However, that does not, in this ordinance, this is just a repeal of the existing regulations. And the regulations that are in place right now, it's a administrative permit, so not decided by this board, but decided by the planning director, which is myself. And what it does is ensure, it just has a few basic standards. If you're to open up a commercial outdoor shooting range, you would need to manage your lead. You'd need to manage any stray bullets. You'd have to have 1,000 feet separation from the firing position to any habitable structure. And then there's a 90 decibel sound limit to any building. So a lot of our noise regulations are measured from the property line. This is actually measured from the nearest building. Those are basically the standards that apply, and because they're not really discretionary, it's adjudicated by the planning director. So I guess with that, I'll answer any questions that you have.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Strawn from the board, the commission?
Mr. Strawn, if we were to propose that this just be in the core area, would that apply to all the densely populated areas in the borough or not?
So the core area is actually a defined area. We have a map of it published online. Chapter 17.61 in Borough Code currently is the section of code that regulates the core area. And essentially there's three major things that can cause you to have to get a core area conditional use permit. One is that you generate traffic in fairly high volume. So like we had 3 Bear go into the core area, that required a conditional use permit. Pretty much anything that requires a traffic impact analysis with the state of Alaska requires a core area conditional use permit. The second thing is noise that exceeds certain levels. And so it's kind of a odd thing to know whether the ordinance is going to actually kick in or not until it's built. We did have one shooting range go in the core area, and we said, hey, we think that you're going to be exceeding these noise thresholds, so you might want to do some testing to see if this permit would apply. And then the third thing is if you're handling like explosive materials, that requires a core area conditional use permit. Those are the 3 things that are required right now in the core area. Now, with the 2020 census that is going to be released really soon here, we anticipate that we will exceed the density threshold, at least in a portion of the borough that would designate us as an urban area, which comes with 2 federal mandates. One is Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is where through the federal government, the state gets a piece, a chunk of money to dole out to the different urbanized communities. And so we would all of a sudden get a piece of that pie. So that's a funded federal mandate. Whereas the MS4 requirements, which is it's going to require that we do additional management of our drainage within the borough, that also will kick in. And I guess the point why I'm saying this is that we will probably be looking at that core area boundary and have it more closely reflect the actual populated area within the borough. So I anticipate likely within this next 6 months to a year, we'll come forward with legislation to modify the core area boundary and probably match at least the MPO boundary.
Any other questions from the commission?
Mr. Strawn, what's the level of like noise complaints that code compliance is seen?
For commercial outdoor shooting ranges?
Yes.
So not many. When we were drafting this legislation, there was an unpermitted commercial outdoor shooting range out in the Butte that we got quite a few phone calls on, but it's because it was brand new. Typically, there haven't been any new commercial outdoor shooting ranges that have gone in lately at all. So any shooting range that's out there, people moved in next to the shooting range, so there's not a lot of complaints.
Any other questions of Mr. Strawn? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Public will be given 3 minutes to speak on this topic. I ask you to keep it to the point, which I trust people will do. First name on the list, Ms. Huddleston. And please spell your last name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Esther Huddleston, Huddleston. I would like the Planning Commission to repeal the outdoor shooting facility ordinance. It also applies to non-profit shooting facilities, and Mr. Straw failed to mention that. And the outdoor shooting facility ordinance, the way it's written, it adds $1 million price tag to build a shooting facility, and that's unrealistic for nonprofits. We have many youth shooting teams in the borough, but however, they have no place to shoot. They have to go to Birchwood to train, and this outdoor shooting facility ordinance was plagiarized because they have things written out of the NRA source book, quote unquote, in the borough shooting facility ordinance. And the 90 decimals, that's your vacuum, household vacuum. They set the level at 90 decimals. And it's an unrealistic shooting facility. That ordinance is unrealistic. And back in 2019, I went to the Meadow Lakes Community Council meeting. Tam Bovee was looking for support from the community councils, and State Senator David Wilson was at that meeting. He approached her and said, if you go forward with this outdoor shooting facility ordinance, you will ruin your political career. Dan Mayfield supported the ordinance. He ruined his political career. Colleen Bake, she was planning commissioner, supported it. She ran for assembly. She lost her bid for assembly. And also Matthew Beck, he lost, and he supported the outdoor shooting facility ordinance when he was assembly member back in 2019 to get this process. And I don't know if you can see that connection, but this last November election proven that people are not happy about this outdoor shooting facility ordinance. And so I hope the Planning Commission supports the vote of the people who voted their current assembly and repeal this outdoor shooting facility ordinance. And I truly believe the last November election was because of this ordinance. And I named several politicians that supported it, and they lost their election. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ruprecht, and I apologize, I'm horrible at pronouncing names.
Excellent with that. Unlike certain people used to mess my name up. Good evening, everybody. My name is Vern Ruprecht. I'm a resident inside the city of Wasilla, living on West Spruce Avenue. As many of you may remember, I used to be mayor of the city of Wasilla on a full-time basis from 2008 to 2014. We addressed gun ranges and gun shooting inside the city because it was a city council matter. We actually got something on the books. Now, I'm fully aware I live in the core dense area. Nothing could be more dense than the city of, and I mean that in the nicest way, the city of Wasilla. The fact of the matter is I have neighbors across the street from me, and I have absolutely no complaint with them. They're borough residents who've been shooting on their property over there for 40 or 45 years. And yet my neighborhood still has grown exponentially, and it doesn't seem to be a problem as long as they're shooting in a safe direction and they're shooting. It's not a noise thing. When this ordinance matter came up, it was broad sweeping and very expensive and was going to put a lot of people back from being unable to do it. As Ms. Huddleston pointed out, especially your nonprofits, the kids, the shooting programs and everything like that. The fact of the matter is the ordinance swept across the entire borough, which is as big as West Virginia and Rhode Island thrown in for a little extra measure, which between the state of West Virginia and in the state of Rhode Island, which is 36 miles by 100 miles, there's 13 gun ranges in that state. You can reach one in 20 minutes. Problem is we don't have areas down here. People that are borough residents can lawfully shoot on their property. I wouldn't deny them their right as long as they're safe. But the fact of the matter is we're in a core area and new things are coming up, especially with Fed requirements and mandates. We have a core area, as Ms. Chesborough pointed out. Now, if there was ever to be an ordinance adopted, it cannot broadly sweep across the landmass as large as this borough. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me at the time, still doesn't. Because, I mean, you have areas outside of this, what we call our core area, where there are vast tracts of land to shoot over flats and everything else. And, you know, especially down in Point Mac area, there's a lot of areas. And I think with a more measured, reasoned way of looking at this, there comes a time there may have to be requirements, because right now there are no requirements for borough residents, as we're well aware, and that's fine by me. But I urge you to send the resolution forward, let the borough assembly deal with this thing, take it off the books for now, and then craft it once these changes are made, as Mr. Strawn pointed out, with the feds and our density, and then readdress it specifically for the core area, not areas like out by Cantwell or North Willow or Willow area itself. Your three cities have planning commissions. They deal with that quite nicely on their own. And eventually one of these days, we'll have more cities. And I thank you for your time. If anybody has any questions, I'd be willing to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. LD Howard?
My name is LD Howard, HLWARD. I've been here since the beginning of this shooting range ordinance. Kind of got everyone riled up and decided to show up to this thing. For anyone who doesn't realize the history on this, especially when it became adopted, was right between the elections. We had a 4-3 vote to vote it down on a reconsideration vote. At that time, Mayor Halter decided to veto it, which actually in turn vetoed it up, which is not something that most people do. I think the voice of the people, I don't know if you all have worked here long enough to remember when I had 678 people, at least that's how many signed petitions here on a Friday at noon at -10-degree weather. People have made it evidently clear that there is no need for this, especially as Vern Halter spoke. Oh, I'm sorry. Mea culpa, brother. Vern Ruprecht, please excuse me, spoke about an oversweeping that this is. We do know that Wasilla does have ordinances. We know that Palmer has ordinances as far as shooting inside city limits. The beginning of all this actually had to do with a shooting range up past Government Creek Road. And it was on 40 acres, plenty safe, and certain citizens there didn't like it. It was actually a personal matter. We had the troopers there no less than 5 times when we were there shooting. And every time they said, no, you're staying safe, you're well within your rights, everything is fine. And that's what had this come about, was a certain core group of people up in that area decided to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And it seemed like no matter how much the citizens said, absolutely not, this doesn't make sense, especially with the restrictions to nonprofits, as Ms. Huddleston also pointed out. I'm the public relations and marketing director for Point Blank Firearms. We train many, many people here in the Valley. I'm also getting in touch with Kathleen Shoup, who is now going to head up the new riflery program for the YMCA children. As it stands now, there's nowhere we can go to train these kids up. I am surprised Neil Moss isn't here. Everyone has probably heard how many kids he sends on full ride scholarships from this valley to really good schools paid for with his shooting program. And it's very hard for him to get his kids to practice all the way down in Birchwood, when many of them live up by Meadow Lakes and Willow and even further. So I would encourage anyone here to please vote to move this forward so that the assembly can vote to repeal it. Thank you all for your ear. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask as well.
Thank you. Mr. Musgrave?
Hello, my name is Dave Musgrave. That's M-U-S-G-R-A-V-E, and I'm a resident of District 6. Thank you for this opportunity to oppose the repeal of the Safe Gun Range Ordinance. The Safe Gun Range Ordinance protects residents of the Matsu Borough from stray bullets, lead contamination, and dangerous sound levels, and only applies to outdoor commercial gun ranges. It does not apply to private gun ranges or existing gun ranges. It was approved by the Planning Commission in 2020 with only 1 member voting against it, and went on to pass the Borough Assembly. It was also supported by 117 Matsu Borough residents who petitioned the Assembly to adopt the ordinance in 2020. Their names were entered into the official record of the testimony to the Assembly in 2020. I sent an email to the Planning Commission this weekend suggesting that the regulations should not apply to less populated areas of the borough. After thinking about this over the weekend, I've changed my mind. Certainly all residents of the borough deserve protection from straight bullets, lead contamination, and dangerous sound levels. I'd like to address the 3 issues that the opposition to the safe gun ranges have centered on. Number 1 is that the ordinance was initiated by a local group of residents trying to stop a neighborhood outdoor shooting range and therefore is not appropriate borough-wide. I was in that neighborhood of the potential gun range. Since that time, that property has been sold and there are no plans for any future gun range. But those residents realize that the gaping hole in legal protection from stray bullets, regardless of the area from which the issue originates, good policy should be enacted that protects residents borough-wide. And the 117 petitioners to enact the safe gun rate ordinance makes this point. Number 2 is that the ordinance infringes on the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. If this were true, then hundreds of similar ordinances and laws throughout the nation, Alaska, would have been struck down by the courts. Those opposing this ordinance are welcome to challenge it in court, which they have not. This ordinance places undue burden. The third one is that this ordinance places undue burden on those who want to develop new gun ranges in the borough. The money and effort spent in complying with the ordinance is insignificant to the overall cost and effort of developing a commercial outdoor range. The cost of buildings, backstops, firing lanes, baffles, side birds, lead trap is a range of $100,000 to $300,000. This does not include annual operating expenses. Compared to the cost of a required review of a site plan by a professional engineer, which is around $1,000. And since this administrative review, the effort to submit an application to the borough is trivial. This was and is a good ordinance to protect the borough residents from stray bullets, lead contamination, and should apply borough-wide. It passed the Planning Commission before, and there's no reason for not to pass it this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia Fisher, I believe.
To get this down here. My name is Patricia Fisher, Fisher, and I am in favor of gun safety. This ordinance addresses safety, pure and simple. That is a right that every resident in the borough has. Residents should not be fearful of an unexpected bullet or bothered by unacceptable noise at all hours of the day or night. The measures laid out in the ordinance to ensure safe gun ranges are simple, common sense rules to protect citizens of the valley. They will not deprive those who love to shoot or youth who want to become proficient in shooting. It is not intended to limit outdoor public gun ranges. This is not a Second Amendment rights issue. Safety requirements are common in everywhere, ordinances in our everyday lives. To name a few, driver's licenses, food safety regulations, rules to prevent water pollution. These regulations or laws keep people safe. Yes, they should be kept to the necessary, to the minimum. And that is what the regulations in this ordinance are. Common sense, practical rules to keep people safe. I urge you to reject the proposal to repeal 17.68 outdoor shooting facilities. This is a safety issue, and the ordinance should remain on the books. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if it's MR or Mr. Kaler.
Good evening. My name is Michael Kaler, Kilo Alpha Yankee Lima Oscar Romeo. First, I apologize for my dress. I came directly from the gym. Second, I've got a lot of questions about this, originally and now. Why 1,000 feet, 1,000 yards, 1,000 meters? Where did that number come from? Anybody do any research? What caliber does that apply to? Any calibers? Second, lead contamination. Very, very real possibility if not managed. Did we do any research? Anybody go check the water table at any of the current ranges to see if that's an issue before we pass this legislation? I'm willing to bet the answer is no, because it probably would have been cited earlier if it was. Stray bullets. Any reports of that? Anybody go dig down through the troopers' logs? They ever get called out for stray bullets hitting houses? Very real possibility, right? Nobody wants that to happen. I agree. Did we do any research? Anybody know what distance X is according to the DOD for an M80 ball? Worst case scenario? Water, glass. What's it reflecting off of? Nobody did any of that research. Somebody put some numbers down, made some stuff to make people feel happy, And we passed it. Cool. We did some happy things to help people. With no numbers, no science to support it, especially with what we've seen over the last couple of years. We have feels and we have science. Both are real to people. But if we don't put those numbers down and we don't have anything to do, then we're literally just blindfolding ourselves and hoping we throw the dart in the right direction. We need to get rid of this and first stay off of people's private property, because if my brother-in-law brings out ammo and pays me an ammo to teach his sons to shoot, and then I get to shoot also, is that now an outdoor commercial gun range? I just got paid. Questions to think about before we get rid of this off the books. Thank you.
Thank you. I think now we'll go to anyone on the phone.
Yeah. 7 callers. Do you have a number for us, one of the last digits? Sure.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir. You have 3 minutes. If you please
Great, thank you.
Spell your name.
You bet, thank you. My name is Mark Masteller, Masteller. And I just want to say right up front, I do not support getting rid of this current ordinance. Basically, we all know that gun ranges are one of the most controversial activities out there. And this particular ordinance only applies to commercial gun ranges. If you repeal the thing in its entirety, then we have absolutely no oversight at all. If anything, what should happen is the issue should come back up for discussion and potential amendment. But throwing the thing out totally just doesn't make any sense. So again, I do not support this resolution. I hope you will vote it down. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Jerry Hupp, Jerryhupp. I'm opposed to 2201 that repeals the outdoor shooting range ordinance. This ordinance establishes common sense regulations governing commercial shooting ranges, not people shooting on their backyards or out on their lots. It has no effect on those folks. It helps ensure that safety and noise levels in surrounding neighborhoods are limited. I am a hunter, recreational shooter. I've handled firearms all my life. The standards established by this ordinance for backstops, sideburns, operating hours, distant neighbors, these are common sense measures, and they're consistent with the ranges where I've shot. The information memorandum suggests that the existing ordinance doesn't make sense in most of the borough where population densities are low. However, be mindful that the range on a high caliber round can be several miles, and any commercial shooting range is apt to be on the road system and population centers, so it can be economically viable. So I urge you to retain this common sense ordinance. This is an issue of land use and safety. It is not a Second Amendment issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller, please.
Thank you. My name is Carol Thompson, THOMPSON. I would urge you to oppose the repeal of the Safe Gun Range Ordinance. As the last speaker said, without it, if you go ahead and repeal it, we're left with nothing as far as protection for residential neighborhoods. This has often been framed as a rights issue. I would like to frame it a little bit differently. There are many things that people like to do with land. And let's imagine that a farmer wanted to, had maybe 10 acres somewhere in the core area and wanted to have a pig farm. Well, that seems like a reasonable and good thing to do. But probably the people who would live nearby that proposed pig farm would have concerns about contamination of groundwater, for example. People in residential areas also have rights. And just as the people who might oppose water contamination from a farm, an animal farm, people who live in residential areas in Matsuburo, whether we're in the core area or in more remote areas, need to have their rights protected as well. And concerns about rights to shoot guns should not necessarily trump those other rights that all of us have here in the Matsuburo, a place that we all love to live for various reasons. And I think if we spend too much time focusing on that complaint that people who want this ordinance repealed have, it distracts us from the larger issues of residential neighborhoods needing to be able to set standards for what is expected and desired in their neighborhoods. And many, many people in the borough want reasonable quiet, so they want reasonably enforced noise containment. They want to be sure that their children and themselves are free from stray bullets. They want to be sure that their water isn't going to be contaminated with the soil contaminated by lead. I personally am the most concerned for myself about noise, and that is something I value so highly that I am willing to spend time testifying at events such as this. I urge you strongly to oppose repeal of this ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next caller, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next caller.
Thank you. My name is
Will the next caller go ahead and speak? If you'd state your name, you have 3 minutes. Anybody on the line?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. If you go ahead and state your name, you'll have 3 minutes to speak here.
Yes, thank you. For the record, my name is Warren Keogh. It's spelled Keogh, and I've been a resident of the borough since the late 1970s. I oppose the proposal to repeal the existing gun range ordinance by Assembly Members Tu and Sumner. I think, frankly, it's a good thing that we have standards for shooting ranges. While an argument could have been made in the past for not having such standards when our borough was sparsely populated, you simply can't make that argument today when our current population is tenfold or more of what it was about 40 or so years ago. As a former NRA certified range safety officer, rifle instructor, and shotgun instructor, and as somebody who owns too many rifles, shotguns, and sidearms, I have to say that the argument I've heard by many supporting the repeal of the outdoor gun range regulations, suggesting it infringes on Second Amendment rights, are just simply utter nonsense. This is a land use issue that establishes minimum standards for the purposes of public safety, noise abatement, and protecting property values. And it's nothing more than that. And I'm going to say it again. This is a land use issue that establishes minimum standards for the purposes of public safety, noise abatement, and protecting property values. So I urge the Planning Commission to keep our existing regulations intact and reject efforts to eliminate it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next caller, please.
Hello. I'm Craig Stewart. That's Stewart. I want to speak of something, personal experience. In the town of Tumwater, when I was a kid, about 1979, mom was watching her kid graduate from high school. And she was up in the middle of the football stadium. A bullet took her right in the middle of the forehead. Single bullet. the police were very confused. They seemed like a sniper picking out one person. It was so precise. It took about a week. And they finally figured out that a couple of kids were shooting uphill at a target a mile away. And one bullet missed the target, kept on going, and guess what? The football stadium was the backdrop. So if those kids had been, if those kids had been on a range with proper supervision and a proper backdrop, Mom could have seen her kid graduate high school. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Next caller, please.
My name's Betty Beers, VEHRS, and I oppose approval of this ordinance. If people who come out here want to be assured of certain standards, they can do two things. They can move to one of the cities where they have zoning, or they can rely on the Borough Assembly and the Planning Commission to promote and approve reasonable ordinances. That's their only protection. Is really growing, and what has happened is when things get out of hand, we play catch up and we try to come up with ordinances and resolutions on the fly to upset certain groups. People need to know what to expect when they're moving to the borough, because we have a lot of strain because of the different populations, and I'm just saying that this ordinance needs to stand because people need to know what to expect, and this is one way the borough can gain credibility in doing it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next caller, please.
Thank you. My name is Beverly Cutler, Cutler, and before I speak, I'd actually like my husband to speak, who's there in the audience and did sign up, and I think you missed him, and he tried to notice that to you before you went to folks on the line. So could I have my 3 minutes after he has a chance to address you, please?
Ma'am, we'll address the people in the audience after the people on the phone.
Okay, well then I'll go ahead. He has a recording to play of the shooting sounds that we heard near us repeatedly over and over before we approached the borough about trying to get some kind of regulation. We are in the neighborhood that was involved that Mr. Howard mentioned, and I would like to give a little different version of what he gave as far as how this all came about. We are outside the core area. The notion that having this ordinance apply only within the core area, even if the core area were expanded, as Mr. Strawn described, is not a reasonable solution. We, in fact, live on Matsuboro farm property, where we have lived since 1977, when the borough sold us this farm property and came up after decades against this situation of this interminable shooting going on next to us at an unregulated outdoor shooting range, which was, in fact, for a commercial purpose, as Mr. Howard may have mentioned, of persons owning a gun shop allowing people to come up and test their guns at the place near us and even have shooting contests. The discharge of firearms is regulated all over the valley. It doesn't matter how many people are near you. You simply can't, for example, possess a firearm while you're intoxicated. You can't shoot across a roadway. It doesn't matter if you live in a place where there are only 10 people per square mile. It would simply be backwards, I think, to think that this can be controlled by saying, we'll just have regulations in the core area. We've grown from 19,000 people to over 100,000 people, and it simply isn't our grandparents' valley anymore. It's a populated, semi-urban, semi-rural place. I thank you for your time, and I hope my husband will get a chance to speak as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more callers?
Can you hear me? Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, greatly appreciate the time. For the record, my name is John James. That's Juliet Alpha Mike Echo Sierra. And I'm very much in favor of repealing this this ordinance 17.68 in its entirety. In my view, it is an ordinance that is unwanted, unnecessary, an ordinance that should be repealed immediately. This is a thinly veiled infringement on our Second Amendment rights, and it's attacked by the left. Hey, we know there was a conservative wave in the last cycle for a reason. We know this. It happened for a reason. You're smart. You understand the reason. You see it clearly. And I think you'll do the right thing. We got to repeal the ordinance now. Like Mr. Howard and Mr. Rupert, Mayor Rupert spoke to. Lots of good reasons. I'll tell you tonight, the left is organized. You see it for what it is. You saw the cycle last cycle, and we replaced a bunch of them. Be smart. Repeal this ordinance immediately. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And there are no other callers? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this matter that has not spoken yet? Yes, sir.
My name is Mark Troutman, Troutman. I am a retired state trooper, so I know a little bit about shooting. My wife just spoke. I don't consider myself on the left. I've put some pretty bad people in jail, and it's just the way it is. I oppose the repeal of this for several reasons. One, a person builds a nice house, or you have a whole subdivision gets built, all of a sudden somebody comes in and starts shooting. You know, without any regulations, that's wrong. I think a person still has the right to sight in their rifle on their property for moose hunting, but you should be able to do that with 3 shots. The other thing I have is public safety, which I really do have that at heart. And I think mental health. This issue is not going to go away. And it'll just keep coming back. So I'm going to play this for you new guys. I recorded this in our field when we were planting potatoes. I was on a diesel tractor, a 100-horse diesel tractor, and you could hear this over the tractor. And then I guess the other thing is the monetary thing. In 40 years, we've probably put several $1 million into developing a farm from raw land. So if you want to build a shooting range, put some money into it and do it right. So this is what we listen to. That went on for about an hour and 45 minutes. It was day after day, any time of the day or night. Like Luke said, this is a personal thing. It was personal when this started. But I talked to the guy, asked him to move his range to the other end of his property, which he refused to do. They were shooting toward our house, toward my neighbor's house, and another neighbor's house. I went up and looked at the range from not on his property, but the next door neighbor, where the range was right on the property line. Sorry.
Thank you, sir. Is it, we have another person on the phone that has not spoken on this matter?
Yes. Hi, my name is Nathan Gardner, Gardner. First time home buyer and builder in one of the proposed shooting range areas. I'd just like to state that I love guns. I'm very, I've grown up with them and whatnot, and I want my kids to grow up with them. However, I happen to be in a subdivision that's going to be affected by a gun range, and because you guys don't have any other laws in place that would protect people like myself, I really don't want to hear it all day long or have potential stray bullets come or other things that people have brought up. But until we come up with a better system for figuring out where an acceptable place for a shooting range is, I would have to say that I would not want to repeal it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on Planning Commission Resolution 22-01 in the audience or on the phone? All right, hearing and seeing none, I'll close the public meeting. Chair will now entertain a motion to approve Resolution PC 22-01. All right, without a motion, there could be no discussion. All right, I'm gonna need a motion.
I move to approve PC 2201.
Thank you, Commissioner Glashen. Can I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. So motion PC 22-01 has been moved and seconded. Any comments?
I was here, of course, when we discussed this before and heard lots of people and lots of concerns about this on many sides. And I've heard tonight many concerns, and I still believe that in this valley we need rules to help protect people. And I know we need gun ranges. We need gun ranges. We need to have them developed. Let's find ways to get them developed so that the kids can have places to shoot. Let's not assume we can't do it. Let's try to work together as a group to make safe places for kids to be able to do this. But I think it's important for us to be safe. And I know that, okay, well, where has that ever happened? Well, I don't want to wait till somebody's dead. I really want to have it be protected now, and so I will be voting against this motion.
Thank you. Commissioner Allen, any comments? Oh, Glenn?
No, I don't.
Y'all look different, not on teams. Are there any other comments from commissioners?
Briefly, there's been some, I think the public input we've got on this issue has been very interesting. I'm new to this commission, and so I was not here before, but I was, a resident of the city of Palmer and paid attention to it in the news and watched it go through the process with interest. We've got sort of one side arguing for a complete repeal and basically no regulation at this time. And then we've got another side arguing for a retention of this ordinance that is pretty broad, that covers this entire valley with sort of a one sweeping motion, which I think is also inappropriate because this valley is made up of very different types of communities, and it's a massive place. And so, I do have a few emails here that sort of seem to strike that middle ground, and I got to say that I think that's where I'm at. I go shooting with my kids all the time. I think it's super important. I think it's very important. I was born and raised in Alaska. I think it's very important for every Alaskan kid to learn how to handle firearms safely. But it seems to me there's a reasonable middle ground to be had. Where we set up these safe gun ranges in places that are not where the dense population is. And I just feel like that's a reasonable approach that intelligent people can make. We can have nuance. It doesn't have to be black or white. And so the concern I have is without having at least a draft proposal of some better ordinance that is more narrowly tailored, is the right thing to do. Just throw the whole thing out, throw out the baby with the bathwater, and I have concerns about that. So I sort of wish this had been approached a little differently, and that we were given some other option that said, okay, we're going to look at doing something a little more narrowly tailored. So anyway, that's my thoughts on this. Thanks.
Any other commissioner comments? I would just like to say that, I guess you have to say it, I'm an avid shooter. I've trained with firearms all my life. I have been involved in the design and cleanup of commercial ranges, private ranges, trespass ranges. As part of the Planning Commission, I feel like it's our job to see conduct or activities that could reasonably cause a problem. There may not have been a problem yet. There may not have been a death yet. There may not have been pollution yet, but this is something that's coming. The regulations, are they perfect? No. They're pretty minimal. They address safety. Physics is the same in the core area. It is up in Cantwell. I echo your comments. I wish there was a middle ground. I hope that there's room for people who are strong advocates of changing this to work with staff. I know staff is very open to compromise and coming up with reasonable solutions. And I really, on any matter, whether it's the lakes plans or this, I don't like repealing an ordinance without something behind it. So that's where I stand. Hearing no other comments, do I have any opposition to passing resolution PC-22-01? All right, hearing that, it looks like we're going to go to a vote. We get to use our little white boxes. Oh, so a yes vote would approve PC-2201, recommending the repeal of ordinance 17.68 regarding outdoor shooting ranges. A no vote would not support the repeal of that ordinance. So the resolution failed to get 4 affirmative votes to support the repeal of the ordinance. All right. So moving on to resolution PC 22-03, a resolution of the Matanuska-Susitna Planning Commission recommending approval of an ordinance exempting the borough landfill from earth materials extraction permit code requirements to allow gravel mining on the property which has been designated as a reserve use land sanitary landfill. Staff on this again is Mr. Strawn. Mr. Strawn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alex Strawn, Planning Director for the borough. Again, this was, even though the informational memorandum said this is the planning department seeking this, that's incorrect. This was Assembly Member Sumner requesting this ordinance through the borough attorney's office. There's a pretty detailed informational memorandum on the justification for this ordinance. If you go, I did ask Jeff Smith, who runs the central landfill, to be here. So if you have any questions about the operation of the central landfill, that resource is here in the room. Speaking with the public works director about this, back in 1980 when we started the central landfill, the first cell was unlined, and they basically just started piling trash into a depression that was naturally occurring there. And as time has gone on, we've become a little bit more sophisticated, and we now line the cells, and to maximize the life of the landfill, they're now digging out they're mining the gravel from the cells to go as deep as they can as allowed by their DEC permit, so that they can fit the maximum amount of trash and the amount of acreage that they have. At the, fully digging it out and going down to the limits that we're able to, the landfill at this pace is anticipated to last for about another 160 years, which is great. That's gonna be a tough thing to deal with when they get to that point, but who knows what the world will be like then. But the fact is that there are, as a inherent to operating a landfill in this area, on these glacial moraines, it's gravel mining is sort of an ancillary use, but it is absolutely necessary to maximize the land that we have. And what they're running into is that they can either sell the gravel or they can pay to have it hauled off. Now there's over 600 acres. I think it's around 650 acres that is dedicated to be landfill at the central landfill. Right now, 200 acres of that is permitted for gravel between a conditional use permit and intermaterials district, which is, we don't do new intermaterials districts. That's been repealed, but the IMDs that were there are allowed to continue. So right now they're good as far as the cells that they have, and then also the C and D monofill that's in there. But if they want to expand from the area that they're at, they're going to have to get additional permitting. They did bring forward a proposal to have the entire 600 and so acres permitted, and the Planning Commission sort of let them know that they would not approve that, that if they wanted to come back with something smaller that they would. And so they did do that, and that's where we're at right now. And I think the thought process is that they're going to have to sell it anyway. And so that's why they're seeking this approval of exempting the landfill from the borough regulations. And of course, you may have all sorts of questions about gravel regulations as they're in code right now, or about the landfill, and definitely happy to answer those questions.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Strawn?
So, Mr. Strawn, so this would mean that forever, they don't have to get any kind of permits to take any more gravel out, correct?
Well, forever is a very long time.
Well, the next 160 years, is that what
unless some other law was adopted, correct, they wouldn't have to get a CUP for mining gravel at the central landfill if this were to pass.
And are there people who live, so if it were in another location, are there people who live near enough by that they would be notified that about the gravel removal in other circumstance?
So the section of code that requires notification is 17.03, and it says you notify everybody within a half mile. So absolutely, there's people within a half mile, but even if there wasn't, if it was out in the middle of nowhere, if you don't have enough houses in the half mile, you have to keep going until you find it. Like, I think at least 5 residents that get mail. It's like the minimum amount, but certainly there are plenty of residents within a half mile of the central landfill property.
Any other questions for Mr. Strawn?
Yeah, Mr. Strander, that gravel's being sold, I take it. The borough's selling that gravel?
The borough desires to sell gravel. They've tried in the past and had a difficult time because of, I think they were in the middle of a contract when they realized, oh, we need to get permitting for this, and the contract fell through. There's some details that Jeff Smith certainly can answer those questions. And I think they can sell the gravel that's in the existing spot right now. It's just they want to expand, is that they're going to have to either get this exemption or go through a conditional use permit process.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Strong, just to be clear, the borough receives $0 in taxes from the extraction of gravel from this valley, right?
That's correct.
Thanks.
Any other commissioner questions?
Can I have a follow-up to Commissioner Allen? And, okay, so, but the gravel in the landfill is something that the borough owns, correct? So that we would benefit from selling that gravel, should we do that?
That's correct. The borough would get revenue from the gravel that's extracted from that property. Potentially. I mean, it could be that we would give it away for free because it's worth it to us to do that. I don't know. It depends on, gravel is it's, location, like somebody said earlier. It depends on if there's a road project in the area, is the market of that gravel.
I have a question for Mr. Strawn. Help us understand. So we've got a couple different things here. We've got the reserve use lands for the sanitary landfill, and that's 600 acres. Then we've got the 200-acre interim materials district, roughly. And so that's existing in that area. The borough can do whatever it wants with gravel. It can sell it, it can mine it, it can push it around. And then we've got the conditional use permit for the recent cells where they went through the traditional process and that covered some other acres. So the remaining land that's called the reserve use lands, what can the landfill do on those lands without being exempted? Can they cut down the trees and move gravel around and build landfill cells? So yes?
Yeah, as people often don't realize that you can wipe out all the trees, you can actually crush rock, and you can do screening, you can stockpile, you can do all sorts of gravel extraction activities. It's when you actually sell and remove the gravels when the regulations kick in.
So in other words, under the current process, the landfill has to go through the conditional use permit for the activity of removing the gravel from the property. They could already do everything else.
That's correct.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions for Mr. Strawn?
Do you know what kind of yardage are we talking about?
A lot. These are glacial moraines, and they're digging deep holes. So millions, but Jeff Smith might know that.
Yeah, Mr. Smith, would you like to weigh in?
Sorry, is that better? Yeah, I'm Jeff Smith, the Solid Waste Division Manager. And, it's a really good question. I don't know that I have a total answer for you. I can tell you that in the C&D cell that we're currently excavating and is under the conditional use permit, we're estimating about 577,000 cubic yards. There's millions and millions of cubic yards out in the landfill. And just to answer a little bit more about what you asked a second ago, Stafford, the issue of excavating at in the cell, we can do all that now within the cell. What this permit does is adds an extra regulation of something that we're already regulated for. So for example, through permit from the DEC, we currently have regulations of when we can operate, what we can do with the material and so forth. And in addition, if we wanted to sell it, we have to get a contract and come to the assembly and get approval from the assembly in order to sell that material to somebody else. So the permit just adds one more layer to what we already have to do. So it kind of repeats the same thing, if that helps.
Any other questions for Mr. Smith?
I guess my question would be that I guess we already agreed that we'd have a landfill there and it would be that area. So I'm just concerned about public process. I guess just concerned about public process, and this would take that away, of course, but I don't know how that would impact the decision anyway.
Yeah, I think I can add to that. We have public process through the assembly now, so there is that tool and availability to do that. So that won't change, and with or without the conditional use permit, it will still continue to happen.
Another question. So, but aren't we exempting the borough from a process that private actors would have to engage in? Why should the borough be special? Why should they be treated differently than private companies?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question for you to decide on how to do it. The borough has a responsibility to do the right thing. I can't, I mean, this may be an Alex question, I don't know, but My response to that would be very simply that, yes, it would be doing it differently at the landfill than other places. However, understand that the landfill, when it was developed and made a landfill, already had the right with all of that to, excavate material. The only difference is that it can't be sold outside. So if you sell it outside and have to go through the extra permit process, it's just more work for the landfill. Again, it's duplicating what already has to be done. So it's another process or another avenue that has to do. It is different in that sense. Other people, but they don't have all the other processes that we have. For instance, they don't need to go to the assembly for approval to get a contract to have someone come in and take the material out. They can do that on their own, and up to 20, I think it's 20,000. They can take up to 20,000? 2,000 tons of material. Yeah, thank you. For now. Right, so it is different, but we already have a oversight to do that. The way it's done now, we can extract the material, we can't sell it. They can extract the material and sell it up to a certain amount. Beyond that, they have to get a permit. We would do that. We can't even extract it without going to the assembly and getting a contract unless we have our own equipment ability to do it ourselves. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any other questions? All right, hearing and seeing none, I'll open the public comment on PC Resolution 22-03. Frank?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Frank Seaver. Last name is S.I.
Sir, would you hit the mic on for me, please? There you go. Thank
It's
you,
on?
sir.
Works now? Okay, sorry. So my name is Frank Sealer. Last name is Sihler. So I was hearing a couple new things. I wanted to say something different, but I hear the guys talking about million of cubic feet needs to be moved. Just to see that you guys understand what it is. A truckload is about 15 cubic yards. So we're talking a lot of trucks moving somewhere around, right? You need probably scale houses. You need to keep record what you're actually moving out, right? So if you want to sell it, the borough wants to know, or the public wants to know what money is actually made with it, right? So if you don't keep a permitting process, there's no track. Is it 50,000 cubic yards now? Is it 100? I don't say the public feel really good about it if there's not some track records, and permits are good because you keep paper records, right? You know what's getting out, what's getting paid, and then you can say, see, public, that's what we made money, we pay other things for it. But if that process is taken away, I think you get in a slippery slope. So the other concern I have, if you remove the permit, if we're talking millions of cubic feet, what the guy said, it's a lot, right? So the infrastructure to get where? Does it get to a rail bed? Do you guys stay on a road? And that all without permits? So that's my concern, guys. That's all what I have to say.
Thank you. Dawn Vaught?
Hi, my name is Dawn Viot. It's V-O-G-T. So I'm the president of the Matsu Backcountry Horsemen Association, and we have some concerns in regards to the extraction of gravel from the gravel pit. When we're looking at what's in the commission packet, it says, whereas the Matsu Borough would retain the authority to oversee cell construction, and this is the part that concerns me, and gravel dispersal at the landfill through the contract award process. What hasn't been mentioned this evening is how exactly they're going to remove the gravel from the landfill in an economical to them, which is the borough, and the landfill process. That may include putting a conveyor belt through the Matsu Greenbelt. I don't know how many of you have been out there and have used those trails for hiking and biking and skiing and horseback riding and all those other things. But I understand that the borough itself, we have to have a place to put our trash. I get that part, but the part that's not being addressed this evening is how they're going to remove the gravel from the gravel pit and possibly destroy the Matanuska Greenbelt. And once you have torn all that up, there's no going back and fixing that. And that's a huge concern to us because, as we all know, the Matanuska Greenbelt is kind of a gem. We have this huge, beautiful greenbelt for everybody to enjoy, and to put a conveyor belt through it just so it's cheaper to get gravel from point A to point B, I think is an absolute travesty, and we are absolutely against it. So I think for the people that live in that immediate area also, the amount of noise increase, noise pollution, listening to conveyor belts, trucks running up and down, safety on the roads, having more vehicles out there. I think those are all things we need to keep in mind. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Brandon Mitchell.
Howdy, my name's Brandon Mitchell. It's Mitchell. So they've touched a little bit on this. Yes, it is going to be a huge issue for the Greenbelt. It's going to take away from hiking, biking, horseback riding. You're going to have noise complaints left and right, I'm sure, because of all the vehicles that will be moving through. You have issues on how to get the gravel out. The other issue is the exemptions. Why in the world should the government be exempt from moving stuff? Why should there not be a paper trail? In all honesty, if any of you were to quit, whatever, you would want a paper trail saying, I was here, got paid this, blah, 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 blah. Should be the same throughout. Thank you.
Thank you. Patty Fisher? Or Fisker? Fisher? Oh.
Yes. Hi. Fisher, Fisher. I'm not going to say a lot on this. What bothers me, it says the borough will be exempt from code requirements. I just can't believe that we can exempt the borough and hold other people, operators, to that. I think it's wrong. Now, perhaps there are some legitimate reasons that the borough should have some authority, but it's too broad. They should not be allowed to just be able to execute and dispose without some kind of oversight. So I hope you all reject this idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Claudia Sealer?
Perfect. My name is Claudia Sealer. It's Sichler. I'm his wife. I want to speak as a really avid user of the Matanuska Greenbelt, but also as a business owner. I do understand a little bit, how things sometimes have to work, and public. So I really feel that when they get around the needing a conditional use permit for taking millions and millions of cubic feet of gravel out there, then the public, us here, the ones that they're doing it for, kind of, and you guys, and they just, nobody gets input anymore. Nobody gets to say anything anymore about how that's done. And I think they need to come to us to explain to us a little bit, how are they planning on getting those millions and millions of gravel out of there? The trucks, the conveyor belts, whatever we are talking about. And if you look at a map of the Matanuska Greenbelt and the landfill to the north, and then you look at the gravel pit that's already existing along Palmer Glen Highway to the south, you can actually take a straight line through that from north to south and cut the Greenbelt in half and build a road there, build a conveyor belt there, build anything there without any public input, without you guys' input. Nobody wants that. We need to have input on how that's taken out, how that's done, how they're using everything there, and how they're using the Nuscoburo land to take care of that gravel. I don't mind them making money with taking that gravel out. I think we cannot avoid the landfill getting bigger, the landfill needing the extra cells, the landfill needing to dig down there. And I think it makes total sense to make money with that and not just throw it away or have it hauled off. that would take as much trucks and as much conveyor belts to take the gravel out if they don't sell it, but just give it away. That doesn't help the issue. So yes, we do want to sell the stuff. That makes total sense to me. Like I said, business, right? But it makes sense to be involved in the process on how that's done and making sure we're thinking about our super valuable Matanuska Greenbelt core area, which is, I don't know how that actually happened, that the whole Matsuburo, that the total green, that core area of us doesn't have really more of areas like that Matanuska Greenbelt, where we can actually exercise, have our dogs, take our horses out, take ourselves out, go skiing, go hiking, do all these things. I mean, it's super nice. Every time I can't go to the Greenbelt because of it's too icy or something like that, there is no other area within the next hour that I can go to. So this is really the core area for so many people to recreate, accessing it from 5 different points from outside. That if that gets cut in half because we don't have an eye on how they get that gravel out there, and we cannot tell them, hey, yes, we give you the permission, but please don't cut the Greenbelt in half by a conveyor belt or through a road going right through that, then really they get a free pass for doing anything there. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy Pettit?
Guns and gravel. Boy, I don't envy you guys your position tonight. My name's Amy Knapp Pettit, and I've lived and voted in the Matsuburo since 2005. That's Pettit. I currently reside in District 2. Thank you all for your time and your service to the community in this capacity, and I mean that sincerely. I wouldn't want your job. I'm the executive director of the Alaska Farmland Trust, a nonprofit based in Palmer, whose primary mission is the permanent protection of Alaska's valuable and limited agricultural soils. My comments are provided from my official capacity. The Matsuburo is recognized for its agriculture production, its recreation access, salmon habitat, and livability. People love the borough for many different reasons. As members of the Planning Commission, it is your direct responsibility to serve as an advisory group to the Assembly on issues and activities related to planning, land use regulation, and community development in general. The Farmland Trust opposes Resolution 22-03. The borough has the responsibility of maintaining safety, public health, and compatibility of different land uses throughout its 22,000 acres. As our population continues to grow, the public process becomes even more valuable to ensure all community members have a chance to express their concerns. The permitting process, including the application for a conditional use permit, is a valuable piece of the public process and should not be circumvented for any business, especially those that are extractive in nature. I'm not an expert in gravel extraction, nor its benefits to our borough. That's why I rely on the public process. I have faith that the content experts, borough staff, and Planning Commission members will hold up their civic duty. You will make sure that any company or contractor doing business in the Matsuburo or on behalf of the Matsuburo is accountable, reputable, and responsible. Removing public process from the system of checks and balances is both short-sighted and dangerous. On behalf of the Farmland Trust, I'm speaking out in opposition to Resolution 22-03. I encourage the Planning Commission members to strengthen the public process, not eliminate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next and last on the list is Sarah Gottschall.
Hello, I'm Sarah Gottschall. It's spelled Gotschall. It's kind of a tough act to follow, Amy. Thank you. I had some thoughts, and I've had more thoughts while I'm sitting here this evening, but I'm looking at the seal behind you all, and I'm thinking about public interest, and I'm thinking about public welfare. And I see, I see resources up there. I see the mine and the timber, but the primary focus on that symbol is agriculture and wilderness and recreation and farming. And I just really urge you to think about your responsibility to consider the public interest and to consider the good of the public. And I just feel like this ordinance doesn't serve that purpose the way it should for the good of all the citizens in the borough. It seems like it really serves the purpose of a narrow segment of the borough. My husband and I own a business. I serve on an advisory board. I serve on my community council. I'm an educator. All those things, you know, I just think we have to think about our whole community and not just an easy way to get resources out. It's one thing if you're maybe talking about a smaller project, but millions of cubic yards of material. I've had conversations with people that are kind of peripherally involved with extraction, and they've said things to me like, oh, we always do it really responsibly, and we're going to put the land back the way it was before we worked the land. I don't possibly see how you can put the land back the way it was when you've extracted millions of cubic yards of material. In the middle of or adjacent to some of the most prime recreational land and opportunity that we have in the borough. I've heard the same people say, oh, well, we're going to put the gravel pit underground or we'll build an overpass. Well, I just think the public needs to be involved in that process and have some say in that decision making, because I can't see how that can be done without more input from the public. And so those are my rambling comments, but those are my concerns and my thoughts this evening. And thank you for your time and for your service.
Thank you. Do we have anyone on the line? All right. Would you start with the first caller, please?
Hey, good evening again. My name is Mark Masteller. That's Masteller. And I'm going to speak in opposition to this resolution as well, 2203. I've been out here about 32 years now, and I've seen the value of the Matanuska Greenbelt just grow and grow and grow. So I want to protect the area for the services it provides for our community. I also don't like this resolution because I think it does limit the public process. It takes away the public's voice. So I want to make sure we have good public participation in these kinds of big decisions. And then finally, as has been mentioned by a few people and one of the commissioners there, I just don't see why the borough should be exempting itself from rules that the private sector has to follow. So please do not pass resolution 2203. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller, please.
My name is Jerry Hupp. That's H-U-P-P on the last name. And I, like others, am opposed to 2203. And I simply don't feel that the landfill should be exempt from permitting requirements that are expected of private entities, especially in gravel operations that the landfill have potential to impact surrounding neighborhoods and the adjacent Matanuska Greenbelt. I'm not opposed to removal and sale of gravel from the landfill, but I simply feel that such operations should be subject to a public process and that people impacted by their operations should have a chance to comment. I appreciate that there is some degree of that opportunity with testimony to the assembly, but I think ensuring that permitting is required brings the public into the process earlier, and that's important. So I'm opposed to the resolution for that purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else on the line? Oh, next caller, please.
Hello, good evening. My name is Kimberly Elliott, Casey Elliott, that's E-L-L-I-O-T-T. And I'm calling in my capacity as the Gateway Community Council President. And I would like to read the comments that the Gateway Community Council voted on for February 2nd, Last week, the Gateway Community Council opposes this ordinance as written and prefers the borough and its contractors follow existing regulatory and oversight procedures. It is inappropriate for the borough to be exempt from its own regulations that all other commercial operators are required to follow. Likewise, as the central landfill and surrounding Matsuboro lands are located in the Gateway Community Council area, we feel strongly that the public should be heard in any decision regarding both current landfill area as well as any new development using designated but not currently developed lands. Preservation of our natural landscape is important for the Matsuboro's continued reputation as a community with access to world-class outdoor recreational opportunities. Development of these lands should not be taken lightly, and the land's current status as multi-user trails and natural places is very important, not just to Gateway's residents, but to the entire Matsu Valley's health, happiness, and well-being. So again, as other callers have stated, we are opposed to any limitation of the public's waste in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have another caller that's popped up? All right. Is there anyone in the audience that has not yet spoken that would like to speak regarding Resolution PC 22-03? Yes, sir.
Go. There you go. Yeah, one more time, sir. There you go.
There we go. Mark Troutman. I oppose the repeal of 22-03. I'm not aware of what kind of conveyor system they were talking about putting in and where it's going to go. And I can only say that I think the borough needs to be permitted and get every penny you can out of that gravel. If we're not getting any money from anybody else, you may as well get it from them so you can reinvest in something in this borough, whether it be roads or whatever. 49th State Street, you may as well just turn it into gravel because that's what's going to happen to it with all the trucks coming in and out of there, even though there may be a conveyor belt. And probably the Palmer-Watsilla Highway and every other highway. I mean, you're talking of thousands of truckloads of gravel. So, and I will be back on 2202 when you do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to PC Resolution 22-03?
For the record, my name's David Musgrave, M-U-S-G-R-A-V-E. But for now, I'd like you to imagine that I've got about, a little rounder, a little shorter, slightly bald, gray beard with a polyester suit and a wide tie on. And I'll start my testimony as channeling Eugene Carl Haberman. Hello, my name's Eugene Carl Haberman. When the public process is abridged, everybody loses, and I don't know his whole preamble, but for those who've seen him before the commission before and other locations, he had an important point. You have to have a very high bar to cut the public out of the process, and that was his point. And I miss hearing him, although he was a pain in the, a lot of times, but a lot of time he was right. So if you're gonna exempt the public from this, I'll leave it up to you as to whether they've reached that high bar or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Please turn that microphone off. All right, is there anyone else that would like to speak on PC Resolution 22-03? Hearing and seeing none, I'll close public comment. Mr. Smith or Mr. Strawn, would you like to respond to anything that you heard in the public comment? I know at least one of the commissioners has a couple of questions for you, so.
Yeah, I thought I should clarify a couple of things, might be a good idea. The millions of cubic yards that would be extracted will happen over 160 years. It won't be anytime soon. We have an immediate need and a long-term need. And I keep hearing the conveyor system, and I'll be honest, I can't think of anyone that wants a conveyor system. No one's looking towards it. It keeps popping up for some reason, and no one's supported it. I know companies come to me and ask me about it, and I personally told them, well, if you want to go out to the community and get their support and get everyone on board with it, then we can talk. But until then, there's no interest. So I thought I should mention that as well. And then if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
we have any questions for Mr. Smith or Mr. Strawn?
I'm sorry, if I could just add one more thing I just thought
Yes.
of as well. It's the public process, and I think it's very important to have the public process. But I want to mention again that it will happen at the assembly meeting as well. So it's not being neglected or skipped by this, by having this repealed. They'll still continue to happen. So just wanted to mention that as well.
All right, I have a couple of questions just to
Oh,
clarify.
sure.
And, you know, second meeting as chair. Is there a Matsu Greenbelt? I heard a lot of reference to it, and I know on the map, it's a great big greenbelt, but Mr. Strawn, is it actually in planning documents as a greenbelt? Oh, he hates me.
So there's the Crevasse Moraine Trail System, which was developed as a temporary trail system until the central landfill expands out that direction. And then there's about 900 acres owned by the university right there, University of Alaska Fairbanks, which has got all sorts of trails and recreational opportunities. I think that's what's considered the Greenbelt, is those two big blocks of property.
Right, and the second question I had is, so there was a lot of talk about all the requirements that the landfill already has and being designated as a landfill, all the things that they could do under their existing permits. So just to clarify, right now, if this passes, other than paying for a conditional use permit and having a planning commission public meeting, they would have to follow or would already be following all the other requirements of a conditional use permit to extract gravel. Is that correct?
Well, I guess the difference is that first of all, there's a half-mile mailing and advertising in the newspaper if they were to apply for a conditional use permit. And then also one of the differences, the Planning Commission could put additional conditions on the permit that they may not have to follow right now. I think they already do have some requirements for hours of operation. They do have some requirements for, I think they have a 300-foot vegetated buffer from the outside edge of the property. So a lot of the conditions that are already typical in a conditional use permit, they're already following. So yeah, that's big differences. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions for staff? Yes, Mr. Strawn.
I do have one comment, though. I guess, so the way that this board communicates to the assembly is by adopting resolutions. And if you fail the resolution, what we will do is take the resolution and write failed across the top and send it to the assembly. If you do want to send them any additional information or your thoughts, messages, you could either modify the resolution or create a new resolution to where you could use that to communicate with the assembly. So just wanted to throw that out there, that if you did want to add additional communication, that's a possible path.
All right, any other questions for staff?
If you wanted to be explaining Matanuska Greenbelt phrase, I can explain that to you, what Matanuska Greenbelt comes from, where it comes from.
I think we're good. All right, at this time, the chair will entertain a motion for PC Resolution 22-03. And we do need one.
I move PC Resolution 22-03.
The resolution has been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Resolution PC 22-03 has been moved and seconded. Comments, Ms. Chesbro?
I know that it may not make a huge difference in the long term, but I do think people need a process by which they're notified and get a chance to weigh in. And I think the borough needs to follow the rules it expects everybody else to follow. And I understand the reasons for this, and it kind of makes sense on the one hand. On the other hand, we're also in the business of engaging the public in the work of government, I think is what we should do. And I know that I know that they would be having a hearing at the assembly, but I think this commission is more centered on land use and conditional use permits. The assembly has many other things that they deal with. And so this gives people an opportunity actually to, I think, go wider in their concern about this kind of thing. So that's my thoughts.
Any other comments?
Very briefly, so I represent District 2, which is the city of Palmer, and the city of Palmer has made it very clear on record that they're not opposed to the concept of extraction of gravel and for the borough to make some money on the gravel, but they want to keep the robust public process in place. And I think we're here for a reason. And so that's my concern is exempting government from public process that we expect private actors to adhere to. And that just doesn't feel right to me in this instance. And so I'll be a no vote.
Any other comments or from the commission? I just like to say I agree about the public process. This whole area, and it's something that I've talked to borough staff about for a while. It's confusing to the general public. This land has been designated as landfill for years, and yet we develop trails on it and we charge people money to park there. And last year my wife got a ticket for not having her current pass, which was a little embarrassing. So it's confusing, but at the same time, I have a real hard time duplicating government effort. Borough staff time is limited. Should the borough, and I do a lot of work in Anchorage, and I see one Anchorage municipality department having to write a check to another one, and actually write a check to me to write a check to another one to pay fees that are all internal transfers and should just be waived. The borough shouldn't have to do that. And so I wish this included something about a public notification for sales of a certain size or something like that that would come here. But otherwise, I don't see a reason to duplicate the full effort. So I guess with that having come out in opposition, we will have to have a vote. So if a vote in favor of 22-03, I guess this one's pretty straightforward. A vote, well, no, it's not. A vote in favor exempts the borough from the code requiring a gravel mining permit on the landfill property. A vote no would keep their current requirement where they would have to get a conditional use permit. Is that clear, everybody? Yes, sir. All right, let's have. Well, it looks like I'm in the back of the bus. With only Chair Glashan in favor, the motion does not pass. Gavel it. All right. All right. With that, our correspondence has been moved. We have no unfinished business. We have no new business. Upcoming commission business, it looks like the school site selection committee could use a seat from the Planning Commission. So if anybody's interested in joining that commission or committee.
I've been the lower end, the substitute or whatever, the second. So I wouldn't mind becoming the first. I wouldn't mind becoming the member instead of the sub.
All right. Do we need a motion or did it just pass? Congratulations. And Mr. Strawn, is there anything upcoming that we can't just read about ourselves that we should be aware of other than not talking about? Oh, Mr. Ortiz.
The only thing I would say is there is a special meeting on the 28th that's coming up. So make sure you guys are, it's not a normal day that we would meet. So keep that on the calendar. And there is a joint Planning Commission Assembly meeting on March 8th. So I believe that's it. And same issue, same statements always, if we have any quasi judicial things ever coming up, make sure you guys aren't doing any fact finding missions on that. If you guys have questions, make sure you email those questions to myself or the clerk. That's it.
All right. So, Mr. Strawn, do you have any closing comments? Mr. Ortiz?
No, Chair.
Madam Clerk?
No, thank you.
All right. Now, this is going to be a fun one. Let's see if I look at the right people. Oh. I can't see the front.
I know, Michalski is the last name. I was just going to let everyone know that the pending appeal that went to the BOAA has chosen not to appeal to the Superior Court for the Sylvan Pit. And then if the new commissioners can contact our office so that they can meet with Mr. Spiropoulos. He likes to meet with each of you and go over the Joy of Roberts rules and the role that you do serve here. So if you can all please contact our office to set up an appointment to meet with him. Thanks.
All right, Commissioner Glenn?
I had no comments. I'm good. Thanks.
All right, Commissioner Chesbro?
I guess I would like a lesson from Mr. Strawn and Mr. Ortiz about how to send a message to the assembly versus these things. Is it sort of an outline of the kinds of concerns we had, or, I mean, I guess I don't know how to do it. So sorry, after 5 years, I don't know how to do it, but I'd be glad to get some assistance in how to do that.
I just call them. Mine mostly ignores me, but another one listens, so.
If you don't mind me, maybe what we can do is we can put an email out and send it out to all the commissioners and just kind of outline some steps. And then we can make sure that's available for the public as well, what we sent to you guys, if that would be okay. Perfect.
Commissioner Scoggin?
I have no comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Allen?
No, sir. Thank you.
And Commissioner Rubio?
No comment.
Wow, that was great. I don't think I'll need name tags next time, as long as I write down the order. Give me 6 months or so and I'll have it. I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and at 7:53, the February 7th, 2022 Planning Commission is concluded.